We're entering the final week of the college football season. Next week is championship weekend, but this is the final week of the regular season. The Heisman race is essentially down to 2 players, but with some time left, anything is truly possible. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you guys my top 5 for the Heisman race and who I'd give my votes to if the season ended today. Before we get to my list, make sure you smash that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. I post a ton of college football content here, so if you're a college football fan, this is definitely the place for you. Before I get to my top 5, let me share some honorable mentions first. Coming into the season, there was a lot of hype surrounding Sam Howell and North Carolina. I'm not going to say the Tar Heels haven't lived up to the hype because they're currently ranked in the top 20. However, it doesn't seem like we've heard as much about Sam Howell, who took the college football world by storm during his freshman campaign last year. He's been just as good, if not better, for the Tar Heels this year. The sophomore is completing 69% of his passes for 3,100 yards and 26 passing touchdowns. He also has 4 rushing touchdowns as well. He might not finish in the top 10 of voting this season, but Sam Howell is a near lock to finish there next season. Another quarterback from the ACC that we haven't heard a whole lot about, D'Eriq King, has been exceptional for the Miami Hurricanes this season. After his 50-touchdown season in 2018 for Houston, King was almost forgotten about in 2019. In the offseason, he transferred to Miami, and he currently has them in the top 10. Now, he's not replicating his incredible 2018 season, but he's been one of the better overall quarterbacks in the nation. In 9 games, the senior has thrown for 2,300 yards with 20 passing touchdowns. He's added just under 500 yards on the ground to go along with 4 rushing touchdowns. He racked up 300 yards and 4 touchdowns this past weekend and is Miami on a 5-game winning streak since losing to Clemson. Prior to the season, I said the Hurricanes would be a legitimate team if all they could do was find a legitimate quarterback. Well, safe to say, they found a pretty good one. Now, thanks to the NCAA rule for players' eligibility, hopefully King can actually opt back in and stay and return to Miami next year. I've talked about this many times, but I still want to see a few more games from Justin Fields. Having his game against Michigan canceled this weekend definitely hurts him in his push for the Heisman Trophy. Through 5 games, the junior is completing 78% of his passes for 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns. He's added 200 plus yards on the ground and has 5 rushing touchdowns. This past weekend against Michigan State, Fields threw for 200 yards with 2 touchdowns while adding 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Fields' numbers have been great all season, but like I said, his limited games I think is ultimately going to hurt him and prevent him from being a finalist. If you were to take stats out of the equation, Ian Book is without a doubt a Heisman finalist due to what he's done at Notre Dame this year. Unfortunately, this has become such a stat-driven award, I don't think there's any chance he can finish as a finalist. But, as I mentioned earlier, there's still some time for craziness. Ian Book currently has Notre Dame sitting at number 2 in the nation and has them ready for a potential playoff push. On the year, Book has thrown for 2,400 yards with 15 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. He's also done a lot of damage on the ground as he's rushed for 500 yards with 8 rushing touchdowns. Unfortunately, his numbers just likely won't cut it. However, I feel like Book and Notre Dame are both totally fine with that. They'll trade a Heisman win for a playoff push any day. My final honorable mention goes to the best running back in the country, Najee Harris. With everything Mac Jones and Davonte Smith are doing, it's easy to leave Harris out and forget about his incredible season. He's rushed for over 1,000 yards and is averaging more than 6 yards per carry. He has 20 touchdowns in only 9 games, the most touchdowns in the nation from a non-quarterback. For what it's worth, he's also caught 26 passes for 250 yards. This past weekend against LSU, Harris rushed for 150 yards with 3 touchdowns, dominating LSU nearly on his own. It's really tough for a running back to win the Heisman Award nowadays, but no worries, as he's likely going to be taking home the Doak Walker Award. Before I get to my top 5, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the video and channel out, and it only takes a second to do. Also, drop a comment down below and share with me who your Heisman finalists are. It pains me to move him out of my top 3, but I still managed to keep him in my top 5. Zach Wilson has been phenomenal this season for BYU, but this weekend's loss to Coastal Carolina killed all the momentum he had. He completed 63% of his passes for 240 yards with a touchdown while adding 55 yards on the ground. Now, by no means are those awful numbers, but in the biggest game of his career, he couldn't get the victory. Now, he very well could still finish as a finalist, but his chances are pretty much shot. He's still having a fantastic year, as he's completing 73% of his passes for 3,000 yards and 35 total touchdowns. Unfortunately, when he was given a chance to have his Heisman moment, he couldn't deliver. Cracking the top 5 for the first time in a while is Trevor Lawrence. As I've been saying in previous weeks, I wanted a few more games out of him before getting him into my top 5. Well, he's now played in 8 games, so I think that should do it. As expected, he's been great for Clemson this season. He's completing 69% of his passes for 2,400 yards with 20 passing touchdowns. He's also added 6 rushing touchdowns as well. Had Lawrence played against Notre Dame and beaten them, this would very likely be a 3-man race, but sadly, he just doesn't have that marquee victory to put on his resume this season. When it's all said and done, Trevor Lawrence might go down as one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history to never be a Heisman finalist at any point of their career. Not only does Davonte Smith crack crack my top 5 for the first time all year, he officially comes in at number 3. Not too bad at all for a wide receiver. The last time a wide receiver finished top 5 in Heisman voting was D.D. Westbrook back in 2016 when he finished in 4th place. That season, Westbrook finished with 80 catches in 13 games. Davonte Smith already has 80 catches through only 9 games. Westbrook finished that season with 1,500 receiving yards. Smith already has 1,300. Westbrook had 17 touchdowns, and Davonte Smith has 15. When it's all said and done, Davonte Smith is likely going to finish with better stats in all 3 of those categories. He's the best wide receiver in all of college football, and there's simply no close second. He had an okay game this past weekend against LSU, as he only caught 8 passes for only 231 yards and only 3 touchdowns. Good lord. This guy is straight up playing with his sliders still set on freshman mode, and it's really unfair to any defensive back that tries to cover him. Davonte Smith is having one of the best seasons we've seen in recent memory from a wide receiver, and it would be an absolute travesty if he's not named a finalist. As I've said for weeks, the Heisman is a 2-man race and will truly come down to the final game. Every week I'm going back and forth, but this week I'm putting Kyle Trask at number 2. He's having a historic season, and he's on pace with Joe Burrow's Heisman season from last year, but for me personally, the reason I have him at number 2 is because of Florida having that one loss. I know this is mainly a stats award, but for me, I also take into account the success of a team. With a few games still to go, Trask very well can take the top spot. He's completing 71% of his passes for 3,200 yards and 38 passing touchdowns. What he's doing has been insane. I'm still kicking myself for not making a bet on him prior to the season when his odds were extremely low, because I was super high on Kyle Trask in Florida back in the summer. Regardless if Kyle Trask takes home the Heisman or not, it's still been a phenomenal year for the quarterback and for the Gators. Entering week 15, I have my number 1 spot going to Mac Jones. After what we saw from Tua Tagovailoa over the years, who would have thought that Mac Jones could have been even better? He's been amazing for Alabama this season, and for the most part, amazing ever since he replaced Tua last season. He's thrown for 3,100 yards while completing 76% of his passes. He's also added 27 passing touchdowns with only 3 interceptions. This past weekend against FCS opponent LSU, Jones threw for 385 yards with 4 touchdowns. His numbers weren't higher because there were children watching the game on TV, and he didn't want to massacre a team live on television. Let's be real, he could have thrown for over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns if he truly wanted to. I talked about this in my last Heisman video, but another reason I have Jones at number 1 is the fact that he's shown up for every big game this season. Against Texas A&M, he threw for over 400 yards with 4 touchdowns. Against Georgia, he threw for over 400 yards with 4 touchdowns as well. Not to mention, he absolutely lit up Auburn and LSU, Alabama's 2 biggest rivals. Mac Jones has been nothing short of exceptional for the Tide this season, and I currently have him as my Heisman favorite. Well, there you have it. What are your thoughts on my list? Drop a comment down below if there's a player I didn't mention, or if someone is too high or too low in your opinion. Also, drop a comment with your Heisman frontrunner and who you think's going to win. If you haven't done so yet, now is the perfect time to smash that subscribe button and click that notification bell. If you love college football content, this is definitely the place for you. Oh, and don't forget to hit that like button while you're at it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.